The movie begins by showing a man named Frank Martin, who owns a modified BMW car. One of them is that to start the car you have to use a password combination. Every day he works as a delivery boy and everything looks normal until we realize that Frank doesn't make normal deliveries. Instead, he was transporting a group of robbers who had just come out of the bank. There were 4 robbers who were in a hurry, but Frank had not yet started his car engine. This is because the robbers did not keep their promise, where they said yesterday that only 3 robbers would be transported. Maybe this looks simple, but Frank in running his business has 3 main rules. And one of them must be in accordance with the initial agreement. Even though he was threatened with death, Frank was not afraid at all.
Rule 1, never change the deal, which also increases the possibility of getting caught. 54 kilos. That was the deal.
3 men, 200.
And from here the chase ensued. We see that Frank has planned a route to outwit the police who are targeting him. It can also be seen that his driving ability is truly extraordinary.
Take us to the choke point.
And in the end they managed to outwit all the police who were chasing them. Once they arrived at the delivery point, the robbers paid more because they suddenly wanted to be taken further. But Frank refused because according to his regulations, everything had to be according to the initial agreement.
Deal is the deal. Rule number 1.
Get in the car.
Long story short, Frank returned to his magnificent house on the beach. The first thing he did was clean his favorite car. We can also see that he has several disguised number plates that he keeps in the garage. After he cleaned up, that afternoon it was reported that the robber he had escorted earlier was caught on the way to another city. At the same time, the doorbell suddenly rang, and it turned out that Inspector Tarconi came. He came because Frank's car was the same type of car the robbers had used to escape. And the only difference is the number plate. But in answering all the questions, Frank looked very calm. And answer all questions rationally. From this conversation we are also told that Frank is a former member of the military.
Sure you don't have time for a coffee?
That evening Frank returned to meet one of the clients who wanted to use his services. From here we are also told that Frank's rule number 2 is that he doesn't want to know the name of the recipient of the package. And he also never told me his name.
Rule 2, no names.
The next day Frank left early in the morning because his destination was quite far away. But on the way, his car tire punctured and he was forced to replace it with a spare tire. And when he opened the trunk he was very surprised by the package bag which suddenly moved. At first Frank didn't really care, moreover he had a principle of not opening packages from clients. But over time he became curious too. He finally opened the bag and it turned out. Frank was surprised to find out that the package was a woman named Lai. But on the other hand Frank looked sorry for her. He also gave her a drink and allowed her to urinate. Before Lai urinates, Frank puts a rope around her neck to keep her from running away.
I have to pee.
But it turned out that Lai was able to untie the knot and tried to escape through the forest. Luckily Frank was able to catch him again. Then when Frank wanted to continue his journey he saw 2 police officers checking his car. Frank was forced to beat them up. Frank then put them in the trunk, then continued his journey. Long story short, Frank finally arrived at his destination. Without saying much, he immediately handed Lai to the recipient of the package. He is a mobster called Wall Street. Here Frank lies to Wall that he did not open the contents of the package. And after receiving payment, Frank was asked to deliver one more item, namely a secret suitcase. Without thinking, Frank accepted it because the most important thing was money.
Why not?
Grenoble, 306 Rue de Lac, Mr.
Before delivering the package Frank decided to eat at a food stall for lunch. He also wanted to give 2 drinks to the 2 policemen he beat up earlier. But when he was about to get into his car, suddenly, Frank then realized that the suitcase Wall had given him was a bomb. He rushed back to the mafia headquarters and immediately brutalized him. Frank massacred everyone there. And they really underestimated the wrong people. As someone who is skilled in fighting, Frank was able to defeat them very quickly. But he didn't see Wall there. As a result, he chose to leave after stealing one of Wall's cars. On the way, he was shocked again because it turned out that Lie had been secretly in the back seat from the start. Whether because he didn't have the heart or what, Frank decided to save the girl and take her home. When he got home, he asked what this girl's name was. And it turns out his name is Lie. And according to him, Frank is now in big trouble because he brought him home. Too much nonsense. Frank decided to sleep and let Lie do whatever she wanted. Including if she wanted to escape from there though. But instead of running away, Lie unpacked Frank's old things and decided to stay the night there. On the other hand, we are shown Wall visiting his members who are hospitalized. And he was told that this was all Frank's doing. But instead of showing compassion, Wall instead killed his members to cover up all this chaos in front of the police.
Just keep it that way.
The next morning, for some reason, Lie suddenly became very friendly. She served Frank, from making bread to getting him drinks. But when she went to the front door to get the milk, Inspector Tarconi suddenly came back. And this time Frank was really in serious trouble because his burned number plate was found by the inspector. But Frank said he was also looking for his car, which had been stolen by someone 2 days ago. To cover up his lie, Lie added to Frank's alibi by claiming to be his girlfriend who he met when Frank lost his car at the market. Not satisfied with all these reasons, Inspector Tarconi even wanted to check what car she used to pick up Frank yesterday. Dissatisfied, Inspector Tarconi again asked Frank and Lie to come to his office to provide information regarding the car theft case. Not long after the inspector left, Frank's house was suddenly attacked by dozens of mafia. Ranging from bazooka to caliber weapons penetrated the walls of his house until it was completely destroyed.
No, don't stay there!
Fortunately, he had designed the house to have an underwater escape area. He also kept an oxygen cylinder just in case a situation like this. The 2 of them dived into Frank's escape house.
It's my own goddamn business.
That afternoon they both went to Inspector Tarconi's office. They were asked a lot of questions. The question is not only about how Frank's car could be stolen, but also about how his house could be destroyed after he had only recently left there. Not to mention more than 5,000 bullets were found in his house. He also insisted on finding out what Frank's job was after retiring from the military, including who is the person targeting him this time. Frank lied again. He said that his house only experienced an ordinary fire while he was at the beach with Lie. Tarconi could only accept that answer.
Then we came back to the house, found it on fire.
Not long after, Tarconi left the room because there was a call for him. While Tarconi is away, Lie hacks into his computer and steals a file about Wall. Here Frank just found out that this woman is a hacker. After taking the data, Lie immediately sat down in her chair again before Tarconi arrived. Tarconi then went back into his room and allowed them both to leave because he didn't have any proof or definite answers. Outside the office, Lie immediately invited Frank to look for Wall. However, Frank refused because he didn't want to deal with the mafia anymore.
The advice, start over.
Lie also persuaded Frank once again. She said there were 400 illegal immigrants on board the ship who were in danger. And among them were her father and older brother. Later they will all be made slaves by Wall. Hearing that, Frank felt a little pity.
My sisters. The ship.
Finally, Frank wanted to help Light to save hundreds of people. They first infiltrated Wall's office first. There Frank pointed a gun at Wall, while Lai looked for the file containing the ship's number. But suddenly Wall tells Frank that Lai's father is not on the ship. He deliberately lied so that Frank would go along with his plan. Not long after, Lai's father came into the room. He is Kwai, a very powerful Chinese mafia. But strangely, Lai actually pointed a gun at her father.
Lie.
我不会再让你这么做了。
Lai then begged her father to stop the human trafficking he was going to do together with Wall. Of course, Kwai doesn't want big losses. He eventually threatens to kill Frank if Lai does not lower the gun. After that, Kwai and Wall's men attacked Frank until he fell unconscious.
95 made it here alive.
Not long after, Tarconi and his subordinates came to Wall's office. The mafia then reports Frank on charges of extortion. But it seems Tarconi doesn't believe what he said. Even so, he still took Frank to the police station. Several hours later, Frank wakes up in a prison cell. On the other hand, Tarconi cannot release him because Wall has already filed a lawsuit. Apart from that, Tarconi was also tired of Frank always lying to him. However, this time Frank spoke honestly and explained about the smuggling of 400 Asians carried out by Wall and Kwai. After hearing Frank's explanation, Tarconi finally released Frank so he could help the police in this case. Frank then pretends to take Tarconi hostage so he can get out the front door safely. Frank arrived at a port. He planned to use a small ship to go to Wall's business location in another port. Inspector Tarconi kindly gives Frank his small revolver. Until he realized that Frank actually had more complete weapons.
You need it. Oh, maybe.
And that night, Frank managed to arrive at the port in question. Using a stethoscope, he combed the existing containers one by one. But the result was nil because it turned out that the container had been transported to one of the trucks belonging to Wall members. Lai himself is seen being held captive and receiving harsh treatment from her father because she rebelled. As they were all about to leave there, a gunshot was heard which turned out to be Frank's. His whereabouts have now been discovered by the mafia, and a fight is inevitable. Frank initially managed to catch the truck he was after. However, the driver realized where he was and made him hit several roadblocks. Until finally he had to jump and land in one of the other vehicles. The mafia who were chasing him were still not satisfied, so this time Frank had to fight it out. It turned out that there were more enemies beating him than he had expected. He again had to fight with several other mafia members. To make it difficult to catch, Frank decided to spill the used oil there. Which then makes it difficult for the enemy to move. But once again fully armed enemy troops appeared. And he was forced to jump into the sea to save himself. Frank also tried to chase the series of trucks using the car he stole in the parking lot. But it turned out that the car's engine was badly damaged due to being forced to speed. Confused about whether to chase the enemy using any other vehicle, suddenly above Frank a small plane passed which farmers usually use to spray pesticides. He immediately got a good idea for using it.
I'm not a tourist.
Leave me. Sure. Where?
Frank also parachuted to land on one of the trucks. It didn't take long for him to take over the driver's seat and throw the driver into one of the ravines. Wall from behind tried to shoot at the truck he was carrying. And long story short, in various ways he managed to catch up with Frank and get into the driver's seat. The fight between the two started again. Luckily Frank managed to hang onto the bottom of the car. But Lai's father noticed his existence and immediately opened fire on Frank with a machine gun. From there Frank finally took reckless action to finish off Wall, who was driving.
Down!
Frank is held at gunpoint while Lai is taken away. And even her father did not hesitate to order his members to kill Lai if she did something reckless. Frank is then taken to the top of a cliff by Lai's father to be executed. He also said that Lai would never follow in her father's footsteps. And not long after that, what turned out to be a gunshot was heard. Inspector Tarconi arrived just in time. Innocent people who were held captive in trucks were successfully freed. And with that, the movie is over. Thank you for watching. Look forward to the next video.